Hello friends, my name is Tom Brocious and this will be the fifth sermon in our sermon series, Is Christianity a Cult? Why the Birth of Jesus Matters. And it's an unusual location from normal, and that's because I am at work right now. It's Christmas. What's up?
I'm looking for false start.
All right, but they're gone, right?
What?
They're gone, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello friends, my name is Tom Brocious and this will be the fifth sermon in our series, Is Christianity a Cult? Why the Birth of Jesus Really Matters. And this is an unusual location for us to preach, but I have to preach it at work in order to have a chance at getting this thing out on Christmas Day. It's going to be a little bit later than expected. I had some car trouble last night and it just did not work out the way that I wanted to. I had to be with my family. So let's make this attempt right here. It's worth it. This is my favorite sermon series I've ever done. I mean, I've only done like 4 or 5 of them, but this is going to be hard to top because it really, I think it has some cool themes. It's kind of original and it's answering questions that I get all the time. People talk to me about this stuff on a regular basis. All the things we're talking about. Number one, I don't think Christianity is a cult. That's what we talked about in Sermon 1, though it has a whole lot of cult-like aspects to it. And Jesus is not a cult leader. So as we try to emulate Jesus, we become significantly less cult-like. But as we pull away, stuff is going to show up. And we talked about how it does show up in previous sermons after that. Like we had, is Christianity mind control? We talked about what is mind control? What does mind control look like? And how does it show up in churches? We talk about that. Is Christianity so heavenly minded that it's no earthly good? We looked at that one. We asked, is Christianity, is its form of purity actually healthy? And a lot of times it's not. We talked about what healthy purity would look like. And today we're asking, is Christianity too obsessed with gaining political power? Which obviously it frequently is. But the name of this sermon series is also why the birth of Jesus really matters. And the birth of Jesus points to a different way of engaging politics in the world. Because Jesus was born, because he lived, not just because he was killed, crucified, and resurrected, but because he lived, we now know a different way to go about living in the world that points to a better way of life, following the example put forth by Jesus. Now, in order to really get at it today of what Jesus in his life means, I actually want to go into the Old Testament and look at a prophecy that points to Jesus' significance. And frequently you go to Isaiah when you're doing Christmas, but I'm going into the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 2. But I want to give you a little bit of context, because how many people know where Daniel is in the Bible? Not everybody. If you do know, I'm proud of you. And if you don't know, you will, because I'm going to give you a little bit of a timeline just to give you some context. Because if you can get that timeline and historical context, you can start getting stuff out of the scriptures. And so remember, Israel is a nation. They started out as one man, which is Abraham. Abraham had a son named Isaac, who had a son named Jacob, whose name became Israel, who had 12 sons. These 12 sons ended up in Egypt, and they proliferated. They had a huge amount of descendants come forth, and there's like millions of them, and it makes Israel very much a threat to the Egyptian power, and the Egyptians put them under slavery. And so Moses comes, pulls them out of Egypt. They wander in the wilderness for 40 years because of rebelliousness, and then the next generation is going into Canaan, the promised land, known as the land flowing with milk and honey, and they will remain there as long as they are living up to this contract that you see put forth in the book of Deuteronomy. As long as they follow that law, they will get to live in this land and live out the mission that God has for them. But they don't do that. The whole story is all kinds of rebellion. It's not like they do one thing wrong. It is pattern after pattern after pattern of accumulated bad stuff happening. And because of that, they are no longer able to really fulfill the mission that God has for them. So God allows them to go into captivity. And the captivity is under Babylon. Assyria took part of their nation many years earlier, but a generation later, here comes Babylon, and they finished the job. And all of Israel that was in the remaining kingdom, all their most prolific members are brought into Babylon. One of those prolific members is a guy named Daniel, who's very smart. He's able to interpret dreams. God is doing things through Daniel, and that puts him in position to go up to the king of Babylon. His name is King Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel is able to interpret the king's dreams for him. And that is where we are. You will see as we read this that this is very, very significant for the life of Jesus. This is Daniel 2, starting in verse 24. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men in Babylon, and said to him, "Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take them to the king, and I will interpret his dream for them." Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, "I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means." The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has talked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have great wisdom or more than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of the bronze, will roll all over the earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things into pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will all have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than the iron mixes with the clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it ever be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor, and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all of its wise men. Moreover, as Daniel's request, the king approached Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and placed them as administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. And so when we sing, O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, we must remember that it starts out in Babylon, not just in Rome. This whole thing is going on. It's a long story that goes on over hundreds of years. They go back into Israel, but are they really outside of this exile? Most scholars today would say that they're not, though it's contested. I believe that they are still in this until Jesus comes. When Jesus dies, it doesn't just wash our sins individually, it washes the sins of Israel corporately. That's very, very important. So when you look at this statue that Daniel is reading before the most powerful person in the world, telling him that his kingdom is going to be replaced by a kingdom that's not quite as powerful, he's talking about Persia, who is to come. And then Persia is going to be replaced when Alexander the Great marches to the east and takes over the whole world to India. And that's the Bronze Kingdom. It splits into three, and it causes all kinds of problems. It's the reason why we celebrate Hanukkah. Maybe we'll get into that next year. But it gets replaced by Rome. Rome is the iron, those iron feet right there. Now, the iron feet also have toes and feet on the bottom there that are mixed with clay. Now, people do not agree. Some people think that it's like the Holy Roman Empire that comes like over 1,000 years later, and some people are like, maybe it's China, maybe it's Russia. And I just follow N.T. Wright, mostly not just because he says it, but because he's usually the one who makes the most sense. And he believes it's Rome mixed with Israel's leaders. Because if you remember, the temple court, the temple leaders are the Sadducees, and the Sadducees are entirely corrupt because Herod has put them in charge of the temple. And so you have corrupt temple leaders and Rome working together. So Israel, which is made of clay, it's a whole thing in the Old Testament, mixed with Rome, is oppressing God's people. And this group is going to be smashed by this rock that's not cut from human hands, which anybody from that time period would tell you is an altar. An altar is not cut from human hands. It's cut from a mountain, and it's hurled at this statue, and this statue shatters. But that rock doesn't stay a rock. It grows into a mountain. And a mountain in this era, in this whole region, not just Israel, but the surrounding people as well, a mountain and a garden are the place where a God dwells. So this statue of oppression is crushed, and it's replaced by a mountain, which is a temple. The temple is going to fill the entire world and replace this way of dominating one another that they find themselves in. Now, the rock that crushes the statue is obviously Jesus, which grows into the temple. And this is not something that goes away just in Daniel. I think you see this theme throughout the New Testament. I think it's what you see in the book of Acts. I think it's what you see in Revelation. The whole theme from Daniel just takes off. Jesus is that rock, not cut from human hands, which smashes the ways of oppression in the world. He smashes those boots. And he does it because he rules differently. We've said it several times in our series so far. He's the Prince of Peace, but his peace is different than Rome's. Rome brings peace by squashing anybody who could rebel. They rule through crucifixion. But Jesus also rules through crucifixion, but not by crucifying his enemies, but by allowing himself to be crucified for the sake of his enemies, so that his enemies can become his friends and be worthy of the title of children of God. Jesus rules differently, and he wants us to follow him in picking up our crosses in the world around us to bring his presence and bring his name into the lives of the people that we are around every day. And this theme, I think, picks up right here. Whether the author intends it or not, it's hard for me to think that he wouldn't mean it, but there's no way to prove it. But stick with me here. This is Matthew 16, 13 through 19. If you disagree, you know I love to discuss it with you. Even if this is years later, I'll love to discuss this with you. So, Matthew 16, 13 through 19. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he said to his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. From the time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed on the third day to be raised to life. Now, this is important for Matthew, but it's important for everything. And it's a super controversial passage because people have died over this interpretation of this passage, because a lot of power was up for grabs based on how you handled this. Because Catholics want Peter to be the rock upon which Jesus builds his church, and Protestants want it to be the confession that Jesus is Messiah, that is the rock upon which Jesus builds his church. Now, I don't think either of them are right. I think Jesus is the rock upon which that the whole church is built on. But they're both right in that the confession is what makes people the rock that builds on the foundation that is Jesus, right? So when Peter says you are the Messiah, that's what makes him the rock that is built on this. But as we also come to that conclusion, we are also part of this institution that's built on the rock which gives us a new way of living. The Messiah must go and be crucified. That's a different way of ruling. That is subjecting yourself to crucifixion rather than crucifying others and putting them under your thumb. So Jesus says, you must follow me. But as you follow me, you become this rock that is built on top of me. And from that, you will go out into the world and bring my name, bring my presence, bring my temple to the ends of the world. You become this mountain that is going to replace this other way of using crucifixion to control the people around you. And now I recognize that this is This is controversial, but I can back up the theme. I can't prove that Matthew is thinking that when he says it. I think the theme is obviously there, and I also think that it's consistent with other passages of the New Testament. We have this passage right here, which is Ephesians 2:19 through 22. Consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people, and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, with Jesus Christ himself as the chief cornerstone. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him, you are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. So, you are being built on the foundation, which is Jesus, and you are being risen to become the temple of the Lord. You are the mountain. So this Christmas season, today is Christmas Day, if you're watching it today. We are celebrating the birth of Jesus, whether it happened on December 25th or not. It doesn't matter. That baby in a manger is changing what it means to be human on this earth, changing what it means to rule on this earth. We rule through service, through sacrifice, and through worship, bringing people into communion with God so that the Holy Spirit can work in the hearts of the people that are connected with God, so that we will live like Jesus, live like our King, progressively become more like our King, so that we can bring true Christmas spirit throughout the world.